Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. It has been a little second. As I kind of mentioned to you guys before, I kind of just wanted to take some time to think about what direction I wanted to go in with my channel and just like in life, because these 20 somethings are really something. I mentioned this to you guys before, but I really wanted to like think about like diversifying my content and just doing more content that's different than what I've been doing. I feel like I am such a creature of habit, like literally the definition of creature of habit, to the point where when something's not working, not working in the sense of like unsuccessful, if that makes sense, but like in the sense of I enjoy it enough to like keep doing it consistently. Anyways, there could be a lot to unpack there when I say that, but point is, I feel like I got to a certain point with vlogging where it felt like I was forcing myself to vlog. And mind you, I generally do enjoy the process of vlogging. I do enjoy the process of editing vlogs, but I feel like sometimes you get stuck, you know, or you feel like you've been doing the same thing over and over again. It feels repetitive. Maybe it's a testament of like not really enjoying it as much. I don't know. You know, who knows what it means? Ooh, there's a bug. Hold on. Who knows what it's actually an indication of, but regardless of what it actually means, I think I know enough to say, hey, like, this is not motivating me right now. This is not really inspiring me right now. I don't really have much energy to make this type of content. So like, let's pivot, because I feel like that's what life is about, right? Like when people say that the only thing that is guaranteed in life, the only constant in life is change, that's what it is. Like, and I don't want to sit here and be so married to the idea of like, oh, like every post has to be a vlog, to the point where I'm forcing myself to do it and it's not feeling good in the process. And ultimately, I feel like that kind of translates like in the actual content. You can tell when someone's really passionate, unless they're really good at faking it, but you can tell when someone's more passionate about the type of content they're making versus something that they're not energized by. So point being, I'm switching gears a little bit. So I really wanted to like open up to you guys a little bit more and just like have more chit chats with you guys, which I've mentioned to you guys in the past, but like, yeah, I just feel like I have a lot to say about a lot. And with vlogging, as much as I look forward to like taking you guys along, as much as I enjoy taking you guys along for the ride when it comes to like my plans for the day, I feel like I more so look forward to diving deeper into like kind of like what happened and my perspective on things. I feel like that's what energizes me more when it comes to vlogging. So anyways, I wanted to like have more videos where I'm just like sitting down like chit-chatting with you guys. So that being said, something that I wanted to like get into a little bit more has been just like my health journey, because I feel like unless you personally know someone, it's really hard to know what they're going through health-wise. I feel like there's a lot of people in this world who have like invisible illnesses, who have invisible diseases, disorders. I mean, we all have our invisible backpacks, right? And like we all present a certain face to the world, but like behind closed doors, like we're carrying a lot of traumas and like, you know, struggles with us. And I think when it comes to like, again, health specifically, it's not something that's commonly talked about because it is something so personal, especially when it's like a condition, you know, like that affects someone's everyday life. So I don't really talk about this a lot, but I wanted to kind of be more open about like my health journey and like my condition, my invisible condition, because unless you knew me, unless we like talked about it specifically, you probably wouldn't know this about me. But when I think I was 19, I ended up getting really sick out of nowhere. And initially it presented itself as something else, which happens sometimes, but who knows what fully happened. And I can get into like the full story in another video if you guys would like. Let me know in the comments down below if you do want to hear the full story, which I'm leaning towards doing that anyways, but let me know what your thoughts are. Yeah, presented itself as something else. I was thinking it was just like a stomach bug, but it was like bad. It's like I felt like I had to vomit or I had to get rid of waste, which that's probably like the nicest way I could say it, but I could not do it. It's not to be like TMI, but essentially I ended up going to the hospital. So when I was 19, I got really sick, and if you guys want to know like the full story, let me know down below in the comments, because I can make a whole video on my diagnosis and everything. But long story short, I was in college at that time. I was going to Georgetown, and I ended up getting diagnosed with diabetes. At the time, I was under the impression that I had type 1, which, to give you guys a quick little overview on like type 1 versus type 2. And mind you, I'm not giving you the scientific or like medical perspective on this or breakdown on this. Like, I'm not a professional. I would probably Google it to get more of an expert's like explanation of this. But type 1, essentially, in simpler terms, is the type of diabetes where over time you start creating little to no insulin. And essentially, insulin is what, from my understanding, helps the sugar go from the bloodstream to your cells. So when you're producing little to no insulin, your sugar, the glucose, aka, is just staying in your bloodstream, which is a problem, which should not be the case. So it can affect a lot of different things, just because if you understand the body, you understand that a lot of things are like interconnected. And like when it's something like having sugar in your bloodstream, like that can affect the kidneys, that can affect the liver, like it can affect everything. So it is huge. It's a huge condition to like live with. Type 2, on the other hand, is the type of diabetes where you will still be producing insulin. You might just be producing less insulin / less effective insulin. So even though compared to like type 1, you're creating more insulin, or you're still creating insulin at a certain rate, it's not as effective as it used to be over time. So those are like the major like differences between the two. And because of the fact that like with type 1, you start to create less insulin over time to the point where, once again, you have very little or no insulin being produced, that means you're almost dependent on medicine. You're almost dependent on insulin for the rest of your life. Both types, I think, come with their own challenges, because with type 1, like, you're pretty much dependent on insulin for basically the rest of your life. And type 2, you could get to a point where like you're managing your health, you know, well enough where you're not dependent on insulin. But even then, like, from my understanding, from like what my doctors have been telling me, both are irreversible, essentially. Like, you can get to a point where it's like well managed and it doesn't really disrupt your daily life as often. But like generally, like once you get it, you kind of just have it. So point is, not to like rant about the differences, or again, not to like make it seem like I'm an expert when it comes to diabetes, but I think I have a general sense of it because it is something that affects my daily life. Yeah, I ended up getting diagnosed with type 1 diabetes initially because there's this protein called C-peptide. This is getting very scientific, but again, just giving you the general sense. When there's an absence of that, usually is an indication that you have type 1 diabetes. So that appeared to be absent for me when they first ran my blood work. So I was under the impression that I had type 1 diabetes. Long story, again, I can get into details about it later, but I actually have type 2. I was misdiagnosed after like 3 or 4 years of being under the impression that I had type 1, again, because of the absence of this protein that I mentioned, of being on insulin, of like, again, managing my diabetes as if it were type 1. Come to find out, I actually have type 2. So that switched shit up for me because now I have to change my way of managing my condition. You don't treat both the same, hence why they're two different types. So essentially, I end up completely changing my lifestyle. And like, again, this is not something people would know if they were to meet me. I could probably assume, I have not been told this necessarily, and I'd be surprised if someone would say this to my face, but I would probably assume if people were to meet me and they saw the way that I like approached health, I guess, nutrition, specifically like fitness, they would be like, oh my gosh, this girl is a fucking lunatic, which to some degree, I don't blame them for thinking that because not fully false. But in that sense, like, it's not just that I'm a stickler for carbs or I'm a stickler for like my gym routine because I'm superficial and I'm one of those girls that love to just do it for show or like do it because it's trendy to like go to Whole Foods and carb count, calorie count. It's literally because this is something that affects my everyday life. And I think that's something that a lot of people misconceive. Not even misconceived, but like a lot of people don't understand that about a condition like diabetes that is invisible. Like, I think when it comes to certain conditions, certain like, just like battles that people are like fighting, you only think of the stereotypes, right? Like, people just make assumptions on what that looks like. There's people of different sizes who have diabetes, but like, again, not many people know that. Not many people talk about that because I feel like there's a sense of like, of shame. And I think in time, if you like work on that and you acknowledge that it is like an insecurity, like it gets easier to like talk about something like this that to some degree, like you don't really have control over. But I think it's just like a cycle because people have this perception of like person with diabetes looks like, why they ended up having diabetes, like just the whole narrative around the condition. And as someone who is affected by it, like, why would I want to talk about that all the time when there is that negative stigma? So I think it makes sense that there isn't a lot of like exposure to diabetes as a condition. There's not a lot of like information regarding that. I think not a lot of people will on their own accord like go out of their way to like educate themselves on something like this, especially if it doesn't affect them. But I'm here to say that like diabetes looks different on different people and takes form in different ways. It affects people differently, and ultimately, again, it is life altering. Like, you can very much still be happy. You can very much still do a lot of the things that everyone else is doing when you have a condition like diabetes, but it's a different thing that you're going to have to like account for when you are doing these things. Like, everyone has spikes in their sugar. Everyone has drops in their sugar levels. That's why we experience things like fatigue when we don't eat for a long time. But when you have diabetes, because your body is kind of like fighting against itself and is not working the way that it should be, it affects you differently. It affects you more. So the stakes are pretty much higher because you have to take into account like, okay, if my sugar drops like really low, I'm gonna need to have like a snack on hand. Like, how can I make sure that I don't have super low lows when it comes to my sugar? Because I could literally pass out. And it doesn't take as much for me to pass out, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think that's one thing, especially when you're type 1, because I feel like lows are more common with type 1 diabetes. But I digress. Alternatively, like, your sugar can get really high, and a lot of times, again, when we're thinking about like someone without diabetes, because I've experienced this before I even had the condition, like when my sugar was really high, I didn't know that it was because my sugar was high. I got really tired. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, when your sugar is really low, you get fatigue. When your sugar is really high, you get really sleepy. These are things that you experience too as a diabetic, except, again, the consequences could be worse because your body is essentially fighting itself. Hopefully, like, I gave you a very digestible, like, explanation of what diabetes is, what the different types are, just to give you some context behind like my everyday life. Like, I think I'm at the point where, because it's been 7 years now, wow. It's been 7 years since I've had the condition. I've learned how to manage it a lot better. Like, generally it's been like pretty well controlled, especially compared to like when I first was diagnosed. Like, my sugars were like all over the place. But I think I've gotten to a point where, like, one, I had to kind of just accept the reality of the situation, which is that this is the condition that I have. And though it might mean my life looks differently when it comes to certain things, like, that doesn't mean that I am not worthy of or destined to have a happy and fulfilling life. Like, I can do a lot of the things that other people are doing. I think it means it might look a little different when I am doing those things. And it means I have to account for a little bit more. But that doesn't mean that I can't, again, live my life. Which I feel like the first few years, bro, like, I was so depressed. And I'm not even trying to make light of it. it's just like, you know, let at the end of the tunnel, like you're kind of just like, oh, that happened. Depression is not funny, 100%, not at all. But I am definitely a type of person who will go through some shit and I'll be like using humor to cope, which my therapist will discuss that later. But I think it just makes it easier to talk about. Yeah. Point is, I was very sad when I first got the condition, when I first got my diagnosis. For years, I still be sad sometimes because I'm like, damn, like what would my life look like if I didn't have this condition? If I could just eat like a quote unquote normal person, what we define as a normal person. If I can just do exercise like a quote unquote normal person. Like, I just think as a person, I've always hated the feeling of like being limited or like being like confined. Like that has always been a pet peeve of mine in whatever I've done. Like, I'm definitely somewhat like a rule follower. I'm definitely someone who's a little practical sometimes, but like generally in every aspect of my life, I'm like, I don't like being put in a box. I don't like feeling like there's limitations on my potential and what I can do. And I feel like that was why accepting my diagnosis was really hard for me, because I was like, wow, like, am I capable of like everything? Like, I can't even like, oh my gosh, I'm getting emotional. I'm getting really vulnerable here, okay? But I can't even like eat something without feeling off. Like, that sucks. That sucks, especially as someone who like found joy in like just being a foodie, like found joy in like going to different restaurants. Like, I loved my coffee and like, sorry y'all. But sometimes you just gotta let it out, to be honest. So I'm not mad at myself for having that very authentic moment. Even though like my lifestyle looks a little bit different, it doesn't mean that, again, I can't be happy in this life. Just because things are hard doesn't mean that I did anything or there's anything about me that makes me deserving of hard things. You know, like challenges, obstacles, they don't pick and choose who they hit. Everyone has their own version of a hardship, you know, of something that they're struggling with on an ongoing basis, or not even struggling with, but like battling with on an ongoing basis. Like, it might be diabetes for me and it might be some other condition for someone else, or it might be financial trouble for another person. So I just think, again, I've had a working relationship with having my condition, but I feel like I'm at a point where I can talk about it more. And point is, I think something that's really helped me in the process of like just managing better is just learning the things that make it a little bit easier to manage better. I think when you make choices, like lifestyle choices, lifestyle changes to limit the amount of stress that this thing could potentially cause you, it makes it feel lighter. So for me, I was like, it's not that diabetes is something that feels super heavy all the time. It's something that feels more heavy when it's uncontrolled. So essentially I had to ask myself, like, what can I do to better control like my sugar and better manage my health to the point where like I don't feel like it's causing problems with my diabetes and therefore stressing me out more or like taking up more space in my life. Right? When I asked myself that, essentially I had to like look at a few things, which were, one, what does my nutrition look like? What do my eating habits look like? If I'm constantly eating things that have a bunch of carbs, especially empty carbs, like how is that helping me out? If I am eating a lot of gluten, or like learning, I think, what comes in the food that I am consuming, learning how to read nutrition labels, understanding like essentially what I'm putting into my body and what goes into that, I think is super helpful. Trying not to eat out a lot because you don't know how people prepare their food. And 9 times out of 10, the way that they prepare it is more like fatty and more greasy than like how you would prepare your food. So I think eating out less with whatever I'm eating, knowing how to read nutrition labels, whether I'm cooking or I am eating out, trying to minimize, again, carbs and sugars when possible. And generally, I think, which is like a lifestyle habit, nutrition habit for everyone, like eating things in moderation is huge for me, because I think at first I was like, okay, I'm just not going to eat anything that can be considered unhealthy. And that's not sustainable. It just makes life so hard when you are limiting yourself in an extreme way like that, because how are you going to participate in a lot of things when you feel like you can't have any sugar at all? Like, that's just unrealistic sometimes. You're going to be put in situations where you're going to have to like work with what you have. And is it a matter of like not eating, or like, again, trying to find the healthiest option available? I would consider the latter. So yeah, I just think learning to like eat in moderation is like super important. Like, maybe I'm not going to be eating snacks all day, every day, the way that I used to, but I'll like include a snack every day or so, just to like feel like, again, have that sense of normalcy. Like, I do deserve to like treat myself here and there. I do. Okay. Also, I'm not gonna give you guys any, again, medical advice, because how you want to handle like your condition, how you want to handle like your health is up to you. I think it's a case by case basis. But what I found was really unhealthy was like denying myself of things that I enjoy just because doctors have told me like, oh, like this is bad for you, like, no sugar at all, like just very extreme things. That was a very unhealthy thing for me to operate based on, like no carbs at all. How are you gonna enjoy food? Literally, like I got to that point where I was like, okay, like I'm eating, but I don't really find joy in any of the things that I'm eating. I never feel like I'm treating myself in that sense. And I think it's important to do that, because yes, I think primarily food is for nutrition, 100%. But I think there's ways to make the things that you're eating, or basically your diet, feel better, feel more satisfying. It doesn't have to be something miserable. So I think learning that as well was like really important. And when it comes to like eating things in moderation, I think it's very important to not only like pace yourself when it comes to eating certain things, but also understanding how your sugar is trending. Generally, I think in the morning, my sugar tends to be higher. I don't know if that's also a phenomenon, but because of that, I think it's ideal for me to have like something that's low carb, some low carb like snack or thing, and potentially a workout. Or when I say low carb, by the way, I mean like 20 grams, not a lot, depending on where my sugar is again. I'll do a workout or maybe not. And then I tend to have like a late actual breakfast / lunch. Thankfully, I work from home, so like I have a little bit more flexibility in how I eat, which I do recognize. Then in the afternoon, I have that like late breakfast, fuller lunch. Oh my gosh, there's so many like complex layers, but usually it takes some time for your body to respond, depending on the type of carb that you're eating, to the food that you're eating. So it's important to account for that too. Like if I eat something with more carbs and that like take longer to burn, I'm not gonna feel the effect of that food until like an hour or two later. Which is why when you have diabetes, they ask you to like check your sugar before you eat and an hour or two after you eat, because that's when your body actually starts responding to what you just ate. So a lot to explain there. Again, Google might be more helpful in terms of explaining that in a way that's more digestible, but essentially because of that, I like to space out my eating a little bit more. So after I have that like meal around like 12 or 1, I end up eating like a snack within like a couple hours or so, maybe a few hours when I'm hungry again. And then I end up eating around like 6, 7. And I usually like to have like a substantial meal. I've been snacking more lately, and sometimes I tend to like do that more, which I'm not sure what the right way to go about it is. I've heard some people say snacking more throughout the day is better for like your sugar levels. I've heard other people say snacking is not good. You should eat a few big meals. I don't know if there's a right way of going about it, but lately I've been trending towards eating a little bit spaced out throughout the day. Yeah, again, I can't tell you that that's the right way to go about things. I think it also depends on like what your schedule looks like what you have for your day. Like if you're obviously, you have a very active lifestyle and you're working out twice a day, that might look a little different for you. Like maybe you need more meals. And it also depends on how you want to feel, because I know for me specifically, like if I'm going to work out, like I like to have a little something in my stomach, just enough to like sustain my sugars at a healthy level and not make them drop. But I don't like to eat so much to the point where I feel like I haven't digested my food fully and I have like a full stomach when I'm like working out. I don't think that helps my workout personally, especially because I have a more cardio heavy fitness routine. But point is, I think there's a lot that goes into managing like diabetes. I think it very much depends on your body, how it responds to like sugar, how much insulin you're producing. Like, I think, why did I do that? I figure that's very weird. But I think it depends on varying factors. Your health history, aka like how your body responds to sugars, how insulin resistant you are, how much insulin you're producing, like what type of diabetes do you have, what type of lifestyle do you have, like are you very active, a lot of things, how much stress do you endure on day to day. I think a lot of these things are very important to consider when you're like managing your condition. I think going to your endocrine is like very important and making sure that you are like managing it well. But ultimately, like, again, I have my days and it's definitely a journey to like continue to like love myself through it and like continue to accept it and like I feel like I want to deal with it every day. But ultimately, like, I have to keep telling myself like I'm bigger than my condition. I'm not responsible for my condition. No one's at fault for my condition. Like, and once again, I am still very worthy of a happy and fulfilling life. I just happen to have diabetes, you know? And I think once you learn to like embrace that and like say, hey, instead of like thinking about it as if it was like a burden, thinking about it as like, this is just my challenge. Like, this is one of my challenges in my life, it really changes your perspective on it. And again, it opens you up to like the silver linings in the situation, again, which can be hard to find. But like for me, it's like this thing happened and like I've really been on top of my nutrition. I've been really on top of like my fitness. I have a really good understanding of like the body, even because it is something that affects me and I'm kind of like forced to have that understanding, that deeper understanding. So I literally have friends be like, what's an A1C? Like, what are carbs? Like, how does insulin work? Like, what is the difference between type 1 and type 2? Like, there's a lot of knowledge that I think it's brought me, and it's also really helped me learn how to maintain like a healthy lifestyle all around in every aspect. So as much as like it's been a challenge once again and been quite the journey, I think that this is one of the things that make me me. And I've learned to like embrace that, you know. I have diabetes, but I'm also a lot of other things. Hopefully you got some insight on diabetes, how I've like managed my condition. So yeah, guys, I know today was a little bit more serious and informative to some degree, but like I feel like it's very important to create visibility when it comes to, again, things that people are carrying in their invisible backpack. This is something that really affects me as a person. It really affects the way that I show up. But unless you were in close proximity to me, you wouldn't understand that this is something that I juggle with. And I think it's important to like be knowledgeable and be like understanding of different people's realities. And so that's just one of mine. I hope this was informative for you guys, even if like this isn't relevant to you necessarily. And I hope if you have been diagnosed with diabetes and like managing your sugars like is something that you are also juggling with on an ongoing basis, that this was insightful for you, because I know how hard it is in every aspect in terms of like mental health journey and like just, again, managing your health. But it's very capable to get to a point where you feel better about it. So yeah, guys, thank you for watching this video. Let me know if you want to hear more about my diabetes journey, my diagnosis, essentially, what I eat in a week, basically, because this is something, once again, that is very important in my life. But with that being said, thank you guys for watching, and I hope you guys catch me during my next video.